It's a truth universally acknowledged that a Janeite, in possession of a great many Jane Austen books, must be in want of more Jane Austen books. I felt that it was only right and proper to start today's video in a bonnet, as God intended, as Jane herself intended, to talk about my experience going to the Jane Austen Festival last September. I will admit my bonnet is now slightly squashed, but I honestly have never felt more beautiful. Like getting into my dress that my mum made, and I'll put a link to the pattern she followed, which is the Daphne dress. I had the most fun getting ready. Whenever I normally get ready for a video, it's kind of, you know, normal and generic. Today felt special. I will be honest with you, there's been a lot of rearranging bosoms going on, which is not normal for my videos, but I'll admit it. But I wanted to film this video in my dress because I know so many of you, when I first mentioned my mum making a Jane Austen dress, I kind of shared that the waiting for it, and also the fact that I now love this pattern. I think it is so beautiful, and the fabric itself is a Liberty fabric, and my mum is currently working on another one for a very special occasion, and it was beautiful. And I've also worn this dress now to a wedding, but most importantly to the Jane Austen Festival, which also was in celebration of Ariel's 30th birthday. It was as much of a celebration of Ariel in my mind as, of course, Queen Jane herself. But I had to start off talking about the dress because I know so many of you shared the excitement, and I think it turned out beautifully, as well as the bonnet that I bought at Chawton House. And I do have a video of everything I bought at Chawton House and Jane Austen's house in Chawton. I have a whole video on me visiting Jane Austen's house, and I bought the bonnet as a bit of a joke to myself at that time, not knowing that I'd be going to the Jane Austen Festival, and it has since been one of my favourite things. It is slightly flat now, but I love the beautiful pink, and yes, it will go with my new dress, and so I will be taking it to said special occasion, even though no one else will be wearing a bonnet. But I think I look beautiful. I know that's egotistic. Just let me have this one moment where I have spent majority of the time setting up the camera, actually just looking at myself. Freya's going to join me. Where are you going, Freya? You cannot jump on the bookshelf. Not today. Not while I look like this. Freya? Don't try and jump from here. What are you doing? You can't jump it from there. That would be silly. And I can't chase after you not while I look like this. It would be inappropriate of my stature. To celebrate Ariel's 30th birthday, Ariel, Lena and I arrived at this beautiful townhouse in Bath with the most amazing view of the city from the living room, and also from the bedroom that I was in looked down directly to the road, and you could see the church, and you woke up to the sound of church bells and birds singing, and we had the most amazing weather. We all arrived to this townhouse on a beautiful September day with no real expectation about what the Jane Austen Festival would be like, and also kind of the anticipation and excitement and anxiety, because we were soon realising that it was obviously, understandably, taken very seriously. And Lena had just finished making her dress, I think, pretty right up until the final kind of moments, and I'll put the link to her video of her making her dress below. And Ariel's dress did not arrive, and so one of our first things we had to do was go and find Ariel a dress. And on the day that we arrived, they had the shop open with all of the different ribbons and hats and dresses, and for me that was the first moment where I felt like I was in a Jane Austen novel. Like, I cannot tell you the excitement of looking around all these beautiful things, shopping for ribbons and different, you know, muslin and just all these beautiful things that made me feel like I was like Lydia Bennet, Kitty, kind of going to look at all the new things that have come in town, and finally finding out a beautiful white dress as well, which I cannot tell you the relief in finding that dress. Along with finding Ariel a dress and also buying ribbons for Ariel's dress. And the fact that I remember being shocked at the price of ribbons just felt like we were straight out of a novel. We also had a chance to wander around Bath and of course go book shopping, and I went to Mr. B's, which is one of my favourites in Bath, and I treated myself. So I will kind of now go into a few things I bought in the Jane Austen Festival, as well as then kind of leaving you with a few clips. But I thought I would start with the book that I bought. In fact, 2 books, but one of them was at Mysteries, so I'll do the other book a bit later. The first book that I bought on our trip to Bath was this beautiful edition of Emma by Jane Austen, and it is one of their stunning Penguin Deluxe editions. I am not normally a massive fan of these books because of the edges, the deckled edges, but there is something so perfect about this edition with kind of the men and women parading in their beautiful outfits. That felt perfect, and also dancing. It just felt like the perfect edition to buy on this trip to Bath, and I've just realised I've got a Beset bookmark in there too. To give you a little bit more backstory, I guess, of kind of mine and Ariel's lore, Jane Austen is a big part of that. So when I first kind of found Ariel on YouTube, it was when she was doing her videos about Jane Austen. I think she was reading the Jane Austen books, and I can't even remember how we became friends. We are so very different, and I always think that we are like different flowers in different gardens, and our little vines just got intertwined and they just can't be separated now. And if you were to separate them, both flowers would die, to be dramatic about it. But I remember watching videos about Jane Austen, and at the time my channel was purely talking about classics, which I guess it kind of still is a little bit. I remember very clearly Ariel's video on Emma, and so at my wedding, the reading I asked Ariel to do as my maid of honour was the last paragraph of Emma. And so of course, for her 30th birthday, the book that I buy myself had to be Emma. One thing I also wanted to talk about in the video was what was I reading at the Jane Austen Festival, because believe me, that gave me more stress than what I was going to wear. I was genuinely anxious about what I was going to read because I felt like it was such an important choice, and I actually went for a novel that I don't associate with Bath at all, but it was a novel that I have reread the least. In fact, I've actually probably reread it the most because I studied it at both undergrad and during my MA, so I've probably read it academically more, like studied it more and therefore read it, but I haven't read it for pleasure. I've read it for pleasure once, now twice in my life. Anyway, it is Mansfield Park, which I think is a controversial Jane Austen for lots of people, but I actually really like Mansfield Park, but I do think it's a novel that I enjoy studying more than I enjoy reading. I enjoy annotating this even for pleasure way more than I think I sit down and read it as a novel. And I think my recommendation for any of you that are reading your first Jane Austen novel, if you haven't yet read her works, is always start with Pride and Prejudice. I always suggest picking up Pride and Prejudice because I think it's one of her funnest. I think it's just one of the best books ever written, but I also think it's really kind of it's accessible as well. But I also recommend, whenever anybody asks me where to start with an author, I always suggest just reading the blurbs and deciding which novel speaks the most to you, because normally the kind of the subjects or themes that speak most to you, the book will then line up really nicely with that. But if all of them are kind of feel the same to you, I would suggest Pride and Prejudice. At the time of going to the Jane Austen Festival, I kind of felt very stressed as to whether I should be picking one of her Bath novels. And I guess you could also count Lady Susan and also, in fact, the Watsons in this. But it really felt a choice between Northanger Abbey, aka the more positive Bath novel, and Persuasion, the most depressing Bath novel, but also the most beautiful. I did feel genuinely stressed about if I should pick a Bath novel, but because I'd both recently read these, so when I went to Jane Austen's house, I decided to reread all of her works, except Mansfield Park, I think. And so it felt like Mansfield Park was the right option to take with me. One way that I tried to convince myself that this also was a Bath novel, which it's not at all, is the fact that the play that they play in the novel, Lover's Vows, was performed regularly in Bath when Jane Austen lived there. So I feel like that's the Bath inspiration, and also the setting of the fact that the play was performed in Bath and Jane Austen's opinion of Bath, and then also Fanny Price's opinion of performing the play, I feel like link up perfectly with her ideas of Bath, which aren't that positive. And that's another thing I feel like we should talk about, is whether we should be going to Bath to celebrate Jane Austen. And I actually think it is completely the correct place to celebrate Jane Austen, because in getting ready for something like the Jane Austen Festival, it's all performance, and there is nothing more wonderful than the way Jane Austen portrays performance, I think, in her novels, and the elements of fakery as well that she doesn't always like, but they're the bits that I find the most fun in her writing, and the characterisation of people and the humour that I feel like actually going to Bath at Jane Austen Festival feels like. I feel like it is kind of silly and fun, and that is, I think, what she would want as well. And I know that she would rip all of us, I'm sure, to shreds. I mean, I'm a hypochondriac, so she'd definitely be ripping me to shreds. To be honest, I think quite a lot of us would be honoured to feel the sharp edge of Jane Austen's pen. I know that I would certainly, yeah. I don't think, in the same way that I'm Marianne and I'm a little bit Emma, I don't think I would be the main character at all. I would be the annoying aunt on the chaise along with the pug about to die. Every season I'd be dying, and then I'd go to the seaside and then still be dying. Jane Austen and Bath is a really interesting and complicated subject in terms of her feelings about Bath. When she first came to Bath, I think she enjoyed it and was fascinated by it, and also a little bit like concerned about the fashions or kind of the new things that were developing in Bath. There's also an element of the fact that later on Bath was just not as fashionable as it was. And of course, when she first came to Bath, she was on the marriage market and, was dancing in the assembly rooms for a particular reason. And I do think it's interesting because she lived in so many different places. As her financial situation changed, especially after the death of her father, you also see her status change in how marriageable she was. And I feel like you can really kind of pinpoint Jane Austen's switch in her feelings towards Bath as she gets older and as time moves on, and the finances. And it's very different when even she's in Sydney Place as to when she is in the Green Park buildings, I think, where she lived in Bath as well. With each move in Bath and each season that passes, you can kind of see her opinions change, especially after the death of her father, where her financial situation is really different. And at the beginning, when she was on the marriage market, and her experience then of living there and first moving there, which I think was in 1801 with her mother, is really different to the place she lived, after the death of her father. And I find it a really interesting thing. And I do think also in some of her letters about Bath, Jane Austen is incredibly sarcastic and witty, and some of the things that I feel like have been taken negatively, actually I feel like is just Jane Austen being really funny. And it's interesting over time. There's also an element of people in Bath wanting Jane Austen to love it so much. And actually it's fine she has a complicated history of things, and it's fine for your opinion to change over time, and it's also fine for you to complain about things but not really mean it, which I feel like actually happened quite a lot with Jane Austen, and that's also fine, that's also completely valid. But I do find it interesting because it kind of charts so much of her life as a writer, especially because I also think the other part of Bath is that she wasn't really productive in Bath. She wasn't writing her great novels really here. Even though I think there were nuggets of inspiration that she took, definitely, it was a place that was also associated with illness and depression. And I think also the idea of it being a spa town is that you are going somewhere where everybody's ill. When she went with her brother to fix his gout or took the waters with her mother, she's going because her relatives and her mother is ill, and they were often ill, and her father dies there. It's kind of mixing this place of being a high fashionable place in society as well as somewhere you would go if you had gout. And I feel like they are two different things, and I think there's the mix of it being somewhere that's sinful and also a mix of somewhere you go to be restored. And in the same way that I think the city has a duality, so does Jane Austen herself. And you see that even with the writing of her novels and her letters. It was kind of interesting when I spoke to people about going to Bath to celebrate Jane Austen. It was really one of the first comments people would make is that she'd never liked it. And even that I think is fascinating. But to be in a city where so many of Jane Austen fans who care enough and are passionate about her work and the world she created and the time that she documented to dress up and do many Jane Austen related things is really special. I've done quite a few different videos of my trips to Bath and also hauls, and you'll notice that every time I always go to Sally Lunn's to get a bun and to get some more tea, and so of course I had to do that. And I especially had to get a bun because Jane Austen famously says, and I don't think the Bath buns were the Sally Lunn buns, but it's still a Bath bun. It's a bun I bought in Bath, but Jane Austen wrote, I think it was to Cassandra, about saying how the Bath buns would disorder her stomach because she would eat that many. And I've never related to something so much. I would be happily disordered by Sally Lunn's buns. Then on our first full day, in the morning, we got ready to go on the parade, which is basically a walk around Bath with everybody else dressed in Regency clothing. And that was the moment that really felt like the most consumed by her novel. I felt like I was in one of her novels. And you know, in the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice, when you've got kind of Lydia and Kitty running around kind of talking about the outfits and getting ready, that is completely how it felt getting ready for the parade, when we were kind of, Lena was sticking pins in Errol's hair and I was kind of I was deciding whether to put eyeliner on, which I think I did because my face is never complete without eyeliner. Getting all of the buttons done up and the pins in the hair and the ribbons tied. It felt really authentic to the excitement of what it would have felt like to go out. And then again for the ball in the evening. Just before the parade, we met up with our friends and got ourselves kind of ready. And the parade was my favourite thing at the Jane Austen Festival. And it was the thing actually that I would book. I would love to do that again. To go around the city with everyone else who is walking because they love Jane Austen as much as you do. And also, everybody, the streets are lined. I had no clue it was such a big thing. We stopped, obviously, the traffic because it's such a big parade of people. I was not expecting as many people. And everyone is just, clapping you on. And you're led by a Regency-style band and their Regency-style dancers. It is the most beautiful thing. And the other reason why I think Jane Austen would have... There's loads of questions about would Jane have wanted this? There's an element of people watching that happens at all of these events that makes me think she would love it. Because I'm sure, she would be able to write amazing letters back to everybody about what people were wearing or what ridiculous things they were wearing or what brilliant things. And so I think she probably would have loved the parade. Then after the parade, we got ready for the ball at the assembly rooms. And these are the same assembly rooms that Jane Austen would have danced in, that Jane Austen would have gone to. And I actually realised when I held up my Pride and Prejudice, I think my little dance ticket, my dance card for the Netherfield Assembly Ball is still in there. And I got ready to go to a ball. Because all three of us only had one dress, it was kind of interesting taking it from day to night. And I literally just pushed my little sleeves down and made it way more scandalous than Jane Austen would have ever allowed at a ball. I also bought this really beautiful pearl headband in the assembly rooms at the stalls where we bought Ariel's ribbons and dress from, as well as this really beautiful vintage pearl necklace that I also bought there. So I was already kind of buying goodies as soon as I arrived, and then in the evening I had my hair down and no bonnet and my shoulders out, so it was really a moment of scandal in the Bath society, and wore my headband. One thing I have to admit is I did not partake in any balls myself because I am really bad at following instructions, and I hate when people think badly of me, so I therefore hate putting myself in positions where I know I'm going to do something very badly, and I get very sensitive about being embarrassed. And I just knew that because I can't follow instructions and get very nervous, I would just not enjoy it. And so I became the designated videographer of the evening, which is brilliant when you go with a whole bunch of content creators. You get to just film all their clips for them. So I honestly had 10 minutes of everyone dancing, and I had a great time just filming that, and then also just watching everybody dance and looking at everyone's outfits. And so again, from the sidelines, I had a pretty kind of Mary Bennett experience, but in a really good way, because that was definitely my choice. I know that I would have hated to have gotten the dance wrong, especially because, understandably, they have dancing lessons beforehand, so everyone takes it really seriously. But I just knew that that would never be me. I would never fall in love at a ball. I would never have met a husband at a ball, unless, in fact, I may have met Mr. Darcy. So maybe actually I would have won after all. I also forgot that in between the parade and the ball, we watched the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice. Because, of course, what else are you going to watch while waiting and while getting ready to go to a ball? Then the next day we met up with Sana and Lex, and we had, was it brunch or lunch? I think it was technically, by the time we got around to it, was lunch at the Royal Crescent, and just kind of sat and chatted. Then we walked along the Crescent to number 1 to go in the number 1 Royal Crescent gift shop, which is actually one of my favourite museums in Bath, and I continue to treat myself. If you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that I collect these St Nicholas decorations, and I have their little teacup that I think I bought in an exhibition in London, but I have a few teacups and teapots now, but I have the teacup but not the teapot, and so of course I had to buy a teacup because actually later on this day we went to the pump room and had a really beautiful, of course I needed to take the waters as well, but we had a really beautiful just cup of tea in the pump room while listening to beautiful classical music and just feeling very, very posh. In the gift shop, I finally bought myself a paperback of the re-release of Black England by Gretchen Gazina, which also has a foreword by Zadie Smith, and this was recommended, I think, after I read David Olusoga's book on Black and British, which is one of my favourite history books ever. I had this on my wish list for a really long time, and I remember wanting to read it at university when I was studying it, and I just never got round to. And then I'd completely forgotten that the paperback would be out by the time we went to Bath, and so of course I had to treat myself because I think the paperback is also just really, really beautiful. I really enjoyed Black England, especially because obviously it gives an insight into a history that I've just completely forgotten about and has been purposely written out of so many histories as well. It takes an era of history that I think we all think we know and kind of turns some of it upside down, and also just presents the reality as well as kind of highlighting really important figures like Sancho, who is someone that I remember studying and found absolutely fascinating, especially in his correspondence with Laurence Sterne. He's one of my favourite writers, and so to have just so many different interesting figures and complicated histories, and to kind of really shine a light on Georgian England in this way is so important, and is still not done enough. And I think we also, especially in kind of academia, do not pay enough attention to Georgian England and England as it is and as it always has been. There's a quote on this book actually from Greg Jenner, which is, "If you ever thought Black British history started with the Windrush, read this book." And that is how I feel. It's a bit like Black and British, like I feel like I just want to force the books into people's hands. This is how I feel about Black England if you're interested in 18th century history, even a tiny bit. While I was in the gift shop, I also picked up this really beautiful card that is an engraved print from 1803 from London of a beautiful dress. I also love this kind of, I don't know what they call that, I'm not very good at kind of fashion history, but kind of like the ruffle around her neck. I would actually love to know what the front of the dress looks like, but it is, I guess, the Empire line. I really don't know that much about, despite having read a lot of books and also studying material culture in the 18th century. I can never remember any words and descriptions around dress. All I know is that the dress that my mum made, she purposely put pockets in for me, which would have not have been of the time, but I always need pockets. But I think I mentioned this actually in my recent video about the Bronte sisters, is that both Ariel and I picked up this card and then didn't tell each other, and then we both kind of lifted the card up to show each other outside and realised that we'd bought the same card. So great minds think alike. Of course, whenever I visit Bath, I had to go to my favourite bookshops. So Luna and I took Ariel to see Persephone books, which she'd never been to before. This is actually one of the very rare times that I did not buy a book from Persephone books, but Ariel did, and I'm pretty certain Ariel has done a video about the books that she bought on her Books and Bound podcast to celebrate her birthday. And so if that episode, I think I've actually listened to it, but I guess it was September, so it's been a while. I will put it in the description below. And then we headed off to Toppings, which this is my favourite Toppings. The one in Edinburgh is fine, the one in Bath is my favourite. There is actually a Toppings & Co opening in York, and I cannot tell you how excited I am. I am going to be there as soon as they launch, as soon as they cut the little ribbon. I'm going to be buying books in that really beautiful bookshop. But the one in Bath is, it was my first ever Toppings I went to, and a bit like how my favourite adaptation of Pride and Prejudice will always be the 1995 with Colin Firth, because it was my first one. That's how I feel about Toppings. And so of course I had to buy something with Toppings, but actually this time I decided to just buy a little small thing, which is this really lovely edition of Love and Friendship with an introduction actually by G.K. Chesterton, which I didn't realise, by Jane Austen. So this is a little bit of her juvenilia. I thought it was like the perfect Bath purchase for me because the last time I was in Bath I bought The History of England by a partial, prejudiced and ignorant historian, one of my favourite pieces of Jane Austen's juvenilia, and I think these are so beautiful. They're published by a company called Renard Press, and they're just so lovely together, and I love the floral designs too, so it's nice to have both of them. I wonder if they do any more editions, I need to look that up. But they're also climate positive, which I thought was really cool. And so, in fact, I think I also bought this from Toppings as well. So every time I go to Toppings, I have to buy a little Jane Austen book. When we were in Toppings, Lex also stopped to sign some of their books, which I always think is really cool, like when an author does that. And obviously, you know, in Toppings you also get some tea, which I always think is lovely. But yeah, so Toppings for me is just like, it feels like a proper bookshop. I think it's because it has ladders and you feel like Belle, which I think any kind of bookish girl's dream was to be Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and so you can kind of pretend that in Toppings, if only for a moment. Then on our final night we went to the Raven of Bath, which is like my favourite pub in all of Bath. The food is amazing, and then if you go upstairs they have like a reading room. I feel like it would be, if I could get married again. And also, both Ben and I nearly went to university in Bath. So we both nearly lived there. It was like our first holiday. So if I had to renew my vows, I would get remarried at the book shop. No, like the library bit at the top of the Raven of Bath. I think it's the top floor. That is where I would do it. I love that pub. And as a part of that, you can also pick up any book there and then buy it, and that the purchase is a donation to charity. When we were just waiting for food, we were kind of looking at all different books, and I spotted Jonathan Livingston's Seagull, a story by Richard Bach, and Ariel and Lena, I think, said that this was a book that they both loved and were just, it really made like a kind of a big impact on them as readers, and I had no idea. I remember them really telling me in detail, I don't know what this was about. And also I know it's about Seagull. I'm clever enough to know that one, but now I don't know what it's about. And I completely forgot it existed until I was looking out for a tote bag, no, a paper bag that I bought from Bath for whatever reason. I kept a few things in there, like my headband and stuff that I actually just haven't used since September. And it was in there, and so I completely forgot about it. But I remember at the time them telling me that I would love it, because it is got really beautiful photographs in as well, which obviously tell the story of the seagull. But I now can't remember why they loved it so much, but they did, and so I am sure I will love it too. And it's really famous. I feel like everyone's read this. So if you also would like, if you also have strong feelings about this seagull, please let me know, and I'll kind of move it to the top of my TBR list. So this has been a Jane Austen haul plus a seagull, as all of the best hauls should be. So that is everything I bought, and mostly everything we did at the Jane Austen Festival, but I will leave you with a few little clips at the very end. But thank you for watching, and if you're here with me now, please leave, I want to say leave a bonnet emoji, leave a hat emoji, or a little quill, something Jane Austen related. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you very soon. I really completely failed to tie that. I'll see you again soon in another video. Next time, not wearing a bonnet, but I think I should start a petition to allow me to have every video with me wearing a bonnet in. Maybe I should only do Jane Austen videos just to wear more bonnets or to have more excuses, even though it looks slightly dented, but never mind. Thank you for watching, and I've said that 5 times. And I'll see you in another video, because I'm really enjoying these regular uploads, so I hope you are too. Anyway, bye!
Yep. It's not as bad as I remember.